Hello everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. So as everyone already knows, the 2.4 characters have officially been announced, meaning that Shenhe, Xiao, Ganyu, and Zhongli are all about to hit the stage. In my next few videos, I will be talking about each of these characters in detail and whether or not they're going to be worth summoning for. But today we're focusing on everyone's favorite emo boy, Xiao. Xiao is one of the big Liyue 3, meaning that he is one of the most popular characters, and many players have been saving up their primo gems for months in order to get him. I once covered Xiao when he first release, but we're going to be taking a look at him through a new lens and discuss whether or not he's actually worth it in today's meta. Xiao is definitely undeniably strong, but even more so than most characters, he has a lot of drawbacks in exchange for his power. So we'll be discussing whether or not he's a good pick for you and your account based on what you already have and your preferred gameplay style. If you do end up finding this video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. It does help me push into the YouTube algorithm and I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact videos from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Xiao. Where do we even begin? As longtime viewers might already know, Xiao was actually the very first character that I hesitated recommending to players. This wasn't because he isn't strong, because he is. He's actually one of the strongest characters in Genshin Impact. By now, you've probably seen dozens of videos about Xiao where he deals well over 60,000 damage per plunge and absolutely desecrates any enemy in his path. Xiao is designed to be a highly offensive unit that specializes in dealing AoE anemo damage. He achieves this by entering his burst form where he dons his Yaksha mask, increases his own attack, and converts all of his damage into anemo damage. However, in exchange for this monumental power boost, his burst also inflicts damage on himself, meaning that if you aren't careful and don't have a healer on your team, then Xiao will definitely meet his demise, which based on his lore is exactly what he actually wants. God, he's an emo. But when you're trying to fight overworld bosses, weekly bosses, and especially Spiral Abyss, this can become quite the hindrance. On top of this, just like Eula and Ito, Xiao often runs into energy problems since he does have a high cost burst. And since the grand majority of Xiao's damage does come from his burst, this is quite a problem. So putting all this together, you can see why Xiao is commonly considered to be one of the most selfish DPS characters in the game, demanding healing, shielding, and energy from his teammates while offering them nothing in return. Well, nothing besides high damage numbers. However, one thing that does make Xiao shine as a main DPS is the fact that he's able to take on just about any content. Because he's an anemo main DPS, he can actually hit almost anything in the game neutrally. This is a huge advantage because it means that while he is selfish, it means that you only really need to focus on him in order to deal damage. And essentially, he'll deal damage no matter what content you're facing. The only real times that Xiao is definitely going to struggle is when he has to deal with corrosion, since it does stack on top of his already decreasing health, and whenever he has to fight an anemo immune enemy. However, in all honesty, they're so few and far between that this is hardly an issue. All in all, Xiao is undeniably strong, but he does have a few caveats that you have to play around. So let's take a quick look at everything that you're going to need in order to play Xiao optimally. Unless you know you can burst down your enemy very quickly, Xiao's HP draining is definitely going to be an issue you need to work around. In order to combat this, you're definitely going to need a good healer, a shielder, or both. And yes, while this is technically true for most characters in Genshin Impact, you're going to notice it way more with Xiao. So who are the top contenders for the Protect Xiao at all costs squad? From personal experience, it's Bennett, Zhongli, Jean, and Diona. Bennett is one of Xiao's best in slot partners since he does give decent healing while also providing a phenomenal attack buff. Jean serves as a 2-in-1 since she does give very good heals, while also doubling as an anemo battery. And if you're lucky enough to have Jean at C4, then she can also provide the very rare anemo shred. Zhongli is without a doubt the best shielder in the game. Actually, with proper investment and timing, you can have his shield up 100% of the time. On top of this, his shield does shred elemental and physical resistance, making him one of Xiao's absolute best in slots. And if you don't have Zhongli, Diona can also be an excellent addition to your team because she can put up shields with her skill, heal with her burst, and if you're running her with the Noblesse set, then you can also increase his attack. Characters like Yanfei, Toma, and Xinyan can all also be very good options in terms of tanks, while also providing additional attack if you pair them up with another Pyro member for Pyro Resonance. And characters like Chi-Chi, Barbara, and Kokomi can all be used for healing, but are probably better off not being used if you have the previously mentioned healers. Not because they're bad, but because the others offer a little bit more to Xiao specifically. As for energy problems, there are a couple best in slots for Xiao. The number one energy battery character is probably Sucrose with the Sacrificial Fragments, because with her Constellations in tandem with the Sacrificial Fragments, she can get up to 3 instances of her skill, all of which you can funnel right back into Xiao to keep his burst up as often as possible. She also provides great crowd control, which can be really helpful when you're trying to group up enemies to plunge on. And like I previously mentioned, Jean is also an excellent option since she does have such a low cooldown on her skill, while still offering considering all the previously mentioned benefits. Venti and Kazuha are both decent options as well, due to their low skill cooldowns as well as grouping enemies, but it's probably better to stick them on other teams if you're looking for elemental reactions. You can also forego having an Anemo battery on your team if you do use members like Raiden Shogun or even Fischl. You just need to make sure that Xiao has a decent amount of ER in order to pull it off. Also, in terms of decent sub DPSs, you can go for Albedo, because he doesn't rely on elemental reactions in order to deal a lot of damage. He helps provide a little bit more energy through his skill. And if you're one of those crazy dedicated Albedo mains, then you might have him at C4, which increases all characters' plunging damage while inside his skill field, aka single-handedly one of the biggest buffs for Xiao by a long mile. Okay, but what about weapons? Do you need a 5-star or can you get away with 4 stars? Obviously, just like any other main carry DPS, he's going to want a 5-star weapon to reach his maximum potential, but you definitely don't need a 5-star weapon for him to deal a decent amount of damage. You can 100% get away with using the Black Cliff polearm, since it does give you a decent amount of crit damage while also giving you attack if you do defeat enemies. He also really works well with the Lithic Spear if you have it. It's able to increase both his crit rate and attack stats. Just keep in mind that it does completely rely on how many Liyue members that you have in your team party, so I'd only really recommend it if you are running 3 Liyue members in your party. However, his creme de la creme 4-star weapon is definitely the Deathmatch. This gives him an insane amount of crit rate while also increasing your attack and defense stats, which is actually really good for Xiao. The only catch is that it is a battle pass weapon, meaning that you will have to buy the battle pass in order to get it. But compared to trying to go for a 5-star weapon, it might end up being cheaper all around. But if you do want to spoil your Xiao, or you already have these weapons on hand, his best 5-star polearms are going to be... Actually, taking a second look at all the 5-star polearms, all of these weapons are good on Xiao. Even Skyward Spine and Engulfing Lightning are decent on him since they do help fix his energy problems, while also having decent attack stats. And Vortex Vanquisher is actually pretty decent on him since you probably want to have him shielded anyway. The increased shield strength as well as the attack buff is really nice on Xiao. However, if you're going for his absolute top tier options, then it's definitely going to be the Primordial Jadewing Spear and the Staff of Homa. And although the Primordial Jadewing Spear is his actual signature weapon, I actually think that the Homa beats it out by quite a bit. While the crit and attack stats from the Primordial Jadewing Spear are very good, and are still definitely better than all of the other 5-star weapons previously mentioned, the Staff of Homa's crit damage substat is just way too powerful. It also gives him increased attack based off of his HP and extra HP, which makes him tankier, which is definitely a good thing for Xiao. So at the end of the day, Xiao actually has a decent amount of options in terms of weapons. Okay, but what about artifacts? Xiao is actually one of the few 5-star DPSs that doesn't have a designated artifact set. Most players, including myself, run him with a 2-piece Viridescent set with Gladiator or Shimenawa in order to increase his Anemo damage while also increasing his attack stat. This can either be seen as a major positive or negative depending on how you're looking at it. On the positive side, this means that you don't have to farm for a full 4-piece set, which is notoriously hard to get. To put things in perspective, sometimes it can take weeks, even with refreshes, in order to get a full 4-piece set of the artifact set that you want. So being able to divvy up your stats between 2 different sets actually makes it a lot easier to build him. However, at the same time, this means that he doesn't have a specified set in order to increase his overall damage and gameplay style. Viridescent Gladiator and the 2-piece Shimenawa set are all generalist sets. They pair well on just about any unit, but they don't actually help Xiao reach his peak potential. Xiao would essentially need something like the 4-piece Shimenawa set in order to increase his normal charged and plunging damage, but unfortunately the full 4-piece set of Shimenawa actually takes away energy when you use a skill, which is extremely detrimental to Xiao's overall gameplay since he wants his burst up as much as possible. So again, good and bad depending on how you look at it. Speaking of good and bad, let's look at his constellations. Oh gosh, his constellations are stinky. Stinky, 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 stinky. I personally believe that Xiao only has one really good constellation and the rest just aren't worth it. So let me break this down real quick. Xiao's Constellation 1 does give him an additional charge on his elemental skill, which is actually really good. Not only does this give you a little bit more damage, but it also gives you a little more energy, which helps solve his burst problems. This won't completely solve your problems if you still have bad ER, but it is noticeable how much smoother your transitions are between burst cycles. But besides that, his other constellations just aren't worth it in my opinion. His second constellation increases his energy recharge, which is nice, but only when he's off field. And since Xiao wants to be on field 90% of the time, this is almost useless. C3 increases his skill damage, which is nice, but definitely not worth it. C4 is definitely his worst constellation, giving him increased defense whenever he falls below a certain HP threshold, but since you're going to be running him with healers and shielders anyway, this really isn't useful, and definitely not worth sacrificing getting a whole new character in the future. C5 does increase his burst, which is really nice, but it is really late. You don't want to go all the way to C5 to get it, and this might be controversial, but I don't think that Xiao's C6 is actually that good. Don't get me wrong, C6 Xiao is an absolute beast in terms of damage when you're dealing with 2 or more enemies. But that's just it. It's completely conditional. You have to have at least 2 or more enemies in order to use this ability. It's really cool to be able to spam your skill like that, and the damage output is undeniable, but there are a lot of situations where you're down to 1 enemy and essentially your C6 becomes completely useless. Overall, his Constellations just don't provide enough value in all situations, so I just don't think that they're worth it. And this is coming from a content creator who has C6'd a couple characters. My advice is to probably just keep him at C0. He's more than strong enough as is, but for those that really love Xiao and just want to give him a little something extra, then going for C1 is definitely an option. Honestly, for free-to-play players, this is actually probably really good because this means that you don't have to feel pressured into getting more Constellations, but if you are a whale, I would probably just say hold off because there are other characters that could probably use their Constellations a lot more. Okay, and one last thing before we get into the final verdict, let's talk about his gameplay. I personally think that players are either going to absolutely love Xiao's gameplay or won't be able to stand it. I actually personally find his gameplay really fun. I think it's really fun dashing around the screen and dealing a lot of plunge damage, but a big warning that I want to give to players is that if you get motion sickness easy, Xiao's not the character for you. It's really easy to get disoriented when playing Xiao because he does go up and down on the screen and the screen is constantly moving. So I can easily see some players getting nauseous while playing. This also makes it very hard to actually see what you're doing or where enemies are, which can sometimes lead to bad clears. However, this definitely isn't the case for everyone, and a lot of people are going to find his gameplay really fun and exciting, and honestly, seeing him do his Pogopalooza is extremely entertaining. My personal recommendation is to definitely try him out in his tryout before summoning for him. This way you can get a good handle over whether or not his playstyle is for you. Whew, and now that we have all of that out of the way, let's get into the final verdict of whether or not you should summon for Xiao. Let's go ahead and break things down into positives and negatives, and then we'll come to a final verdict. Starting out with positives, Xiao is an excellent damage dealer that can be used in just about any content. So long as you're not dealing with corrosion or enemies that are immune to anemo damage, Xiao is always going to be a good option, or at the very least a decent option in terms of difficult content. This means that you can hyper invest into Xiao, and overall he's going to be a good investment. Also, because he's an anemo main DPS, he's pretty flexible in terms of what elements you can bring on the team with him, meaning that you can focus on function rather than the specific element. Xiao also strives in situations where he's dealing with a lot of enemies because his plunging damage does AoE damage. So in content like Spiral Abyss where you're dealing with hordes of enemies, Xiao is a great option for taking out a lot of enemies all at once. In terms of artifact sets, Xiao's actually pretty easy to build since you can use 2-piece sets instead of having to worry about a 4-piece set. Xiao has decent options in terms of weapons. As a free-to-play player, you can go with a Blackcliff polearm. As a light-spending player, you can go with a Battle Pass weapon, and Xiao excels with most of the 5-star options if you're a whale. Xiao's kit is basically complete when you get him, meaning that you don't have to rely on getting any Constellations in order for him to deal a lot of damage. And his plunging attack gameplay style is pretty unique, meaning that a lot of players are going to have a lot of fun playing him. As for negatives, Xiao is an extremely selfish DPS that doesn't really offer much to his team. His burst consistently drains his HP, he has energy issues and a high cost burst, he's heavily reliant on healers, shielders, and energy batteries in order to reach his maximum capacity, as well as maintain smooth gameplay. Xiao currently doesn't have an artifact set that complements his gameplay style, and outside of his burst he really falls off in terms of total damage output. So should you go ahead and summon for him? I personally think it's a bit of a mixed bag. If you like Xiao and his lore and his gameplay style, then definitely go ahead and summon for him because that's definitely what's most important. Xiao is a strong character and he can carry you through the majority of content in the game. He's also decent for free-to-play players because since he can be adaptable to most content, this makes him a jack of all trades and far less situational. However, do I personally think that he's the best unit in Genshin Impact? Definitely not. I personally find Xiao to be pretty clunky and require a lot of investment not only in Xiao but also his teammates in order for him to function as well as other main DPS units. I still think that Xiao is pretty top tier, but I definitely think he's starting to get outperformed by other units as time goes by. So if you want him, go ahead and pull for him, just know that you're going to have to build a decent team for him, and that while he is a powerful damage dealer, you're going to have to work around a lot of problems in order to utilize him properly. Alright, and that's about it. If you ended up finding the video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below with whether or not you're going to summon for Xiao. I'm pretty curious to see just how popular he still is, and I would greatly appreciate the support. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. Like I said, I'm going to try to make some videos about Shenhe, Ganyu, and Zhongli, so keep a lookout if you don't want to miss those. Alright guys, but that's all for now. Until next time, best wishes. Bye.